All right, let's go ahead and get started with these notes. So this is Unit 7, Note 6. We're going to find factors using synthetic division. So we've seen synthetic division a decent amount, right? We take our factor, flip whatever number that is. So, for example, if I give you x minus 2, it becomes 2. If it was x plus 2, it becomes negative 2 that we divide by. So we've seen synthetic division, we know that process, and now we're going to use it to actually find out if something is a factor. So we have a couple theorems we're going to learn today. One is remainder theorem. This states that when f of x is synthetically divided by x minus k, so again, for example, x minus 2, the remainder is equal to f of k. So for example, if I wanted you to find f of 3, that would be the same thing as if I said, okay, synthetically divide by x minus 3. So, for example, I'd take 3 and synthetically divide it out. That remainder, whatever that last number is down there, is my answer. So that sounds a little bit confusing, but again, that means that f of 3 is the same thing that happens when we divide by that number, right? But really the factor is x minus 3, the opposite. But if we divide by that number, the remainder is our answer. Let's see what that actually looks like. A little confusing to think about. First example, I want to evaluate f of 2. Using synthetic division. So if they tell me I have to use synthetic division, then I have to use it. But think about this. Haven't we already learned how to find f of 2? We've seen that before. If I want f of 2, I replace x with 2. So everywhere I see an x, I put a 2. This is one way to find f of 2. But if I say you have to use synthetic division, we can't do that. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, I know f of k is the same thing as finding the remainder when I divide by that number. So I'm going to synthetically divide by 2. Now, I know that given this, it seems that I'm missing some values. So I'm going to start with 2 because that seems to be the highest power that I have, x to the 6th. Then I need x to the 5th, x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared, x, and my number. So sometimes I'll kind of label them up here just to make sure I check out every single one. And it looks like most of these are going to be zeros in here. My x has a coefficient of -1 and my number's -5. So I've covered everything. It might look a little better if we erase this stuff. But that can be helpful to set yourself up. Now I'm going to synthetically divide. So I'm going to bring down my 2. 2 times 2 gives me 4. All right, I keep going. 4 times 2 is 8. 0 plus 8 is 8. Now 8 times 2 gives me 16. So 0 plus 16 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32. That gives me 32. 32 times 2 is 64. 64 minus 1 gives me 63. 63 times 2 should give me 126. And then -5 plus 126 should give me 121. That means what I just circled is my remainder. And they told me my remainder is my answer. So my answer is f of 2. That's what they want me to find. It's actually equal to 121. The same thing would be true if I plugged in 2 for x. All right, so that is my first example. Now let's try number 2. Okay, now what I want you to do is pause this video, go ahead and try this on your own, and then I will leave the answer in the key for you. Okay, so try this on your own. It looks exactly the same as that top example, and then see if you can get that answer correct. Okay, same ideas are in the delta math as well. Let's move below to the factor theorem. This is the second theorem we're going to do today. This one says that if the remainder is 0, or there's nothing left over, when f of x is divided by this factor, right, then that's a factor of f of x, okay? What that means is that k is a 0 of f of x. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is, okay, if I give you the factor x minus 3, and I divide that out, right, and I get 0 as a remainder, that means this is a factor, right? Well, a factor is not the same as a 0. To find a 0, I have to set that factor equal to 0. And in this case, okay, I add 3, I get the answer 3. That's my 0. So x minus 3 is my factor. 3 is my 0. So that's what they're saying with all this stuff with the k and the x, right? It really means, okay, that thing with the x is my factor, and that number without the x is my 0. Okay, so we're going to talk about that more next week as we get into this. But let's see what that means for an example. Number 1, they tell me, okay, which one of these is not a factor? Well, if something's not a factor, it's not going to have a remainder of 0. So they give me 4 options. I'm just going to start with the first one and try synthetic division until I get an answer. So if I firstly want to divide x minus 1, I should set that equal to 0. Add 1, add 1. Really, I'm dividing 1 out. Now I'm going to set this up very quickly for us. It looks like all of our numbers, our powers are covered, x to the third, x squared, x, and our number. So I'm going to start dividing. I got my 1. This gives me -3. -3 times 1 is -3. It gives me -40. And then it looks like -40 times 1 is -40. Now it looks like, okay, that gave me a 0. So is that a factor? Yes. Now they say which one's not a factor. I have to cross this off because that clearly is a factor. The remainder is 0, it's a factor, not my answer. So let's go ahead and try 9, right? Because I know if I set this equal to 0, the number I divide by would be 9. Now I'm trying 9 with the same exact numbers just to see if this is a factor. I'm going to divide, bring down my 1. I get 9. That leaves me with 5. Going a little quickly here. Then I get 45. So let's see, that should leave me with 8. 8 times 9 is 72. That's going to be a way big number, right? That is not going to be 0. So we don't even have to add these up. We know that this is not a factor, right? This is going to be my answer. My answer is whatever remainder is not 0, and this one is not 0. So you'll see problems like this in the delta math, and these are the types of problems that you have to check with synthetic division, each problem. All right, now let's try this last one. This is kind of one of the trickier ones you'll see in the delta math, because now they're asking me, okay, if f of x is this whole thing with this random k in it, and x minus 2 is a factor, what's the value of k? They're asking me to solve for this random value. Well, if x minus 2 is a factor, then what's true when I divide that out? Well, if it's a factor, the remainder is 0. So let's keep that in mind and just say, okay, let's try synthetic division. If x minus 2 is my factor, that means I want to divide by 2. So I'm going to set up my division. I have 3, 0, k, and -10. So notice how I put k in the spot of one of my synthetic divisors. That's because k is the number in front of x, which is exactly what I want here. I want my numbers in front of those values. So I covered my x cubed, x squared, x, and my number, which is all I need. So I'm ready to start solving, right? I'm going to bring down my 3. 3 times 2 gives me 6. So I get 6. 6 times 2 is 12. But now, what do I do in between these two? Well, we're adding down. Every single time we do this here, we're adding down. So really, I get k plus 12. I don't know what k is. So I can't do anything with that yet. But now I have to take k times 12 times 2. Because isn't that the process that we do? I multiply, right? Well, 2 times k plus 12 isn't so bad. We've seen that, right? Distribute. So now I'm left with 2k plus 24. That goes in this last box here. Well, now let's see what happens if we add those up. Well, if I add -10 plus 2k plus 24, really I have to add like terms. Well, like terms are just numbers. So I end up with 2k plus 14. Now again, what did they say? I want to solve for k. So what has to be true about this remainder for it to be a factor? It has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to say 2k plus 14 is equal to 0. Now, do you think you can solve that for k? I think so. So I'm going to start by subtracting 14. I get 2k equals -14, divide by 2, and I get k equals -7. And what did they ask me to do? What's the value of k? I found the value of k, so I'm all done solving. All right, so there we go. We got an answer. So all of these problems should be similar to what's on your delta math. So at this point, you should go try your homework, see what you can come up with. Watch the videos if you need some help there. You can use any of the methods I mentioned today. Just keep in mind that synthetic division and keep practicing. All right, so good luck. Email if you got questions.